Hello, and welcome to today's special webinar event on impactful software delivery through feature experimentation. Today's webinar is sponsored by Split and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, there are a few things that you should know about this webinar. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. And I should mention there will be a demo throughout the presentation. So, if you have questions, send them in the moment, and we'll try to get to them at a couple of breaks during the demo. Second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. There's a link to book a personalized demo with Split. There's also a link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club, where you can get access to Actual Tech Media's great printed resources on technology topics, as well as a link to the ATM Event Center, where you can find more events like this one. So I encourage you to access those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. Third, at the end of this webinar, we will be awarding a $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky attendee on the live event. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. You can find the official terms and conditions in your handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll see them now. Finally, one of the best benefits of an event like this is that opportunity to ask questions. And so we do have a $50 Amazon gift card for the best question of the day. And at the end of the event, we'll look at all the questions, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. And with that, let's get to today's great content. So I'm very pleased to announce our speaker, or bring on our speaker, who you've seen here on the video with me. It's David Martin, a solutions engineer from Split. David, welcome to the webcast.
Thank you. So, Scott, you have to tell me, is there any chance of me getting that $300 card?
There is none. It will go to a member of the audience.
Darn it.
You're not
Okay,
eligible. Neither
maybe
am
I'll
I,
have to come to
unfortunately.
another webinar next time. So, yeah, just as a brief introduction for my audience, thank you for coming today. In my career, I have been a full-time developer, I have been a product manager, and I have been a solutions engineer at various places. And just for background, I was a product manager before I came to Split. And part of the reason that I came to Split was that I saw it had such a uniquely good solution to the problems that I was experiencing in my role. So I'm going to tell you more about that in just a minute, but I thought that would be helpful as an introduction.
That's great. Well, the floor is yours. Take it away.
All right, thanks. So what is impact-driven development? What are we talking about? So the thing to think about is, especially if you're in products, but even if you're an engineer, the way historically software has been built, think back before the cloud, right? We had on-premise software and we would build features into the on-premise software, and then we would cross our fingers and hope that our customers would upgrade to the latest version every 6 months, every year. That was typical, right? And of course, the cloud changed everything. Now you can ship new versions of software continuously if you want to, right? But you have the same problem in the sense that when you're disconnected from your customer, you don't know what they're using. You don't know what they're not using. You don't know how they're using it, right? And your features, if you just release features, what we found, and this is in the industry literature from Microsoft and from other places, is that 80% of the features that software companies release have either a neutral or negative impact on their actual goals with the product, right? Think about that for a second. 80%. And the thing that's, I think, really hard about that is it's not just that you make a mistake with a feature, and this was true from my past experiences with a product manager, is that you might make a mistake and then just keep building on it and building on it and building on it. You're putting bad money after bad money and you're getting nowhere, right? So how do you get out of this problem, right? The answer is it starts with feature flags. So this slide has a couple of examples of how feature flags are used. My favorite way of explaining feature flags is to remind you of your experiences in a shopping mall when you walk past a store that had a bunch of sheetrock up and a sign that said maybe Cheesecake Factory coming soon, right? And behind that wall, there were saws and there were carpenters and electricians, and there were people that were doing all of the work to put the store into perfect shape so that it would eventually be able to serve customers. But the problem is that the mall can't shut down for construction. It would just be far too expensive. So what they do, they have that wall, right? And that is the basic form of a feature flag, to take something that you're developing and put it under flag, they say. Another thing they'll say is go dark, right? So we're going to see some examples of going dark and what that means. If you have the ability to separate release from deploy, then you're in a position to make intelligent decisions about when and how to deploy your features. So the platform, the Split's feature delivery platform, has several elements to it. There is the basic feature flagging, of course. We have a free edition, by the way, which for shops that have 10 or fewer developers or product managers, they might want to use the free edition. But if you're bigger than that, we're going to grow with you. The monitoring and experimentation get fed by the data streams that you see at the bottom of this slide. So first of all, the feature flag stream is going to tell you this feature got the control, this customer got the control, that customer got the treatment. So now you're set up to do A/B testing, right? And that's how we're going to get to impact, right? The performance and behavioral data you see, some of the Split salespeople put in all the logos with the things that we integrate with here, but there's too many of them. It just gets too complicated, right? The bottom line is you're going to capture your customers' behavior and experiences with Split. You can do it with built-in techniques. We have a track call that we use, or you can integrate with tools like Segment and mParticle and RudderStack or Mixpanel, for example. There's a long list that keeps going, right? And those tools will provide Split with the perspective it needs in order to finish one of those A/B tests. So I'm going to pause for a second because the next thing I'm going to do is go into product architecture and explain to you how our cloud-driven architecture is unique. But before I do that, is there anybody in the audience that has a question about something I've covered?
No, not yet. So yeah, keep on going. Oh, wait a minute. We do have a question from Edward. He's wondering, does this work for both waterfall and agile development environments?
Yes, it does. It's best suited to agile because it is kind of part of the CI/CD pipeline that typically appears with agile shops. But we do have customers that are using it for waterfall development. And feature flags are certainly something that you can benefit from, whatever your development practices are, right? So that's a good question. Thanks. So let's look at the architecture. So here we go. All right. So it looks like this is going to let me do my build too, which is fantabulous. Split actually has several architectures. And the architecture that I'll show you first is the client-side architecture. It's popular. It's the browser. It's mobile devices like Android and iOS. And if those devices want to participate in feature flagging, frameworks like React Native, like these are all covered by this architecture, right? When you, in your application, go to use Split for the first time. So Scott, is there a way for me to get the build, or is this all I'm going to get out of this one?
Yeah, if you, well, do you want me to build it? I can, there's the next button over on the right side. Okay.
It's on the next will do it. Okay, I got that. There it is. There we go. Awesome. So the next thing that happens here in this client-side architecture is that you create a Split SDK instance, and it actually downloads what we call a rollout plan. What's a rollout plan? Rollout plan is just feature flags. It's the feature flags for one environment. It could be your stage environment. your dev environment, your production environment. There's a little key that you embed with the SDK that will get you the right rollout plan. So that rollout plan actually comes off of a CDN. We use something called Fastly. It has points of presence around the globe to minimize the latency of pulling that rollout plan. And by the way, after you've pulled it once, we cache it. So the rollout plan will be something that you can lift from cache for the second visit, the third visit, the fourth visit. So this is a very high performance architecture. But there's something else that's special about doing it this way. With the rollout plan at the SDK, Split can actually evaluate the age of a user, the account balance of a user, and decide whether or not to give them a feature with that private information. We don't have an arrow that sends the private information to the Split cloud. We don't store customer private information. If you're using Split, you don't pass that private information out. The SDK actually does it all locally, right? So it's very secure. This makes us popular with healthcare in Europe. It's a difference between us and the other solutions that are on the market. So the other factor to this is network resiliency. If you're using a mobile application and you have customers that temporarily get bad bandwidth or they lose their bandwidth, the Split SDK isn't using the network to evaluate transactions at all. It's all being done locally, like I'm saying. So for those customers, they're going to have the same experience from Split with or without the network connected. So there are a number of Split customers that find that appealing as well. Now, when we do get a network connection, we send what we call impressions back to the Split cloud. So we are sending some data. This is a stripped down journalistic record of who got the feature when, right? So this is how we're going to know that a particular user was in the A group or in the B group. And if you're sensitive about the user ID being passed, you can hash it. That's fine with us. It doesn't matter, right? And so we have some customers doing that. So the bottom line is that you have a cloud-driven feature flagging architecture that's extremely low latency. If you kill a feature with the Split user interface, within a second, it's going to tell the application to shut down that feature. And that will be part of my demonstration in a moment. So anyway, I'm hoping you're impressed with what you see here. Before I move on to server-side architecture, do we have any questions about this? This one is typically a source of questions.
We have a question from Vasanto's wondering, we release software apps every 3 months. Can customers update the new release automatically without any firewall stopping the updates using this method?
Yeah, so the feature flag, and we can look at it together, is a switch in the code, right? So that's going to stay the same regardless of your feature updates. So I don't think that using Split will have any impact on that type of release schedule.
Okay, great. You got a comment from Edward who says, I like it. So good job.
Oh,
keep
great.
going.
Good. All right. So the Split picture, the dare I say, metaverse is richer than just the client-side technologies. So a lot of Split customers are using server-side technologies like Python, .NET, PHP. All those are popular. Node.js. Everything you see here, there's actually a longer list. This is just some of them. If you're on the server side, you get an additional opportunity. So on the server side, if you're willing to put up a Redis instance or cluster for Split, you're going to host that, right? It's in your cloud. You can see in this picture. We give you something called the Split Synchronizer, which is a service that will update the rollout plans into Redis automatically, low latency, fast sync. There's some built-in tools to manage it. The Synchronizer is fantastic because with the rollout plans in Redis, your server-side code doesn't even need to use the CDN that I mentioned earlier. It can go against Redis for its rollout plans. So your 50 millisecond latency, 25 millisecond latency, whatever it is, it drops to under 1 millisecond latency for feature flag evaluation. So this is a really high performance architecture that the server-side customers can often benefit from. And there's one more. I was talking to one of the participants earlier, who told me that he was an old school mainframe programmer, and he said, I really like feature flags, but can I put feature flags into my COBOL code? And the answer is probably yes, thanks to this split evaluator. So the evaluator takes the split SDK and wraps it as a proxy, really, with a RESTful API service, right? So that split evaluator lets you do an HTTP GET. You can say, give me the treatment for this split for this user, and it will reply over an HTTP GET request, right? So that means that you can put split anywhere, really. So we have one of our customers, Comcast, has put split into their Roku channel. So Roku's written in BrightScript. We don't have an SDK specifically for BrightScript. Doesn't matter. They're able to use Evaluator. It's very high performance, right? So this is yet another architecture option that's available to my friend Walter, the COBOL programmer. Yes, they are still out there. So that's it for architecture. I'm going to get into the product demonstration. While I switch over, if you have Scott, if you want to pepper me with any more questions, I can jump in.
Yep. No, there's no other questions at the moment. Although I'm monitoring that the question. So if you have one, just go ahead and type it in, and we'll grab it.
All right. Now, I didn't see any familiar names in the list of participants besides Walter, of course, today. So for those of you who don't know me, I have a terrible sense of humor. I apologize in advance at my jokes, but you have to live with me for just a little while here. You know, what I did to prepare for this presentation is I went out onto the mean streets of Austin and I found a few hundred volunteers. I live in Austin, Texas. I guess I should say that. And these volunteers agreed to be part of a feature flag, an experiment, a split, right? That's what we call them because they're both. And I gave each of them a letter and a number to identify them. That's a key in splits terms. That's their unique identity to the feature delivery platform. So the split is called new onboarding. And right now, they're all getting this red box because the split is off. So remember I said split does going dark, right? This is separating release from deploy. This feature may or may not be fully implemented at this point. It doesn't matter. Nobody in production, none of my volunteers can see it yet. When you're ready to start passing it out, one safe thing to do is to say, let's give it to the employees. So we have a list set up of the employee identifiers, and now they're going to get pulled in. And we can identify individual users if we want by their key. So I4, F7. Scott, which one do you want to see light up here?
Is there an S3?
There is an S3 all the way at the bottom. All right, we'll do that one. So I'm going to save the changes to the split.
Hopefully picked one that's off screen.
No, that's okay. I can scroll. But we can see S3 just lit up. How about that? So This is what Split calls testing in production. So when I say that, sometimes I get a snicker from a developer in my audience. It's like, no, that's not what I mean. It doesn't mean just pushing your code out with no testing. Testing in production means that you're acknowledging your staging area, your user acceptance testing is not a perfect mirror of production. The production architecture, network architecture, software architecture is going to be different. So there are going to be bugs that slip out of QA and stage and even those UAT areas, right? So what Split customers do is they identify safe users like the ones we picked out here, and we give the feature out to just those users, just like you see here. And those users can look at the feature and say, yeah, the font isn't the right size and the pixels are off for this. They can smoke test the feature and give you that feedback about whether it looks right in production before you've touched anybody else, right? Now, similarly, if there are users that you want to keep out of the feature, maybe they're VIPs. You want them to be late adopters of the feature. And this actually is related to one of the questions that was asked earlier, right? You can put them into this off treatment as well, and then they will not get the feature until you finally do take them out of this list. So those are some powerful aspects of rolling a feature out. Now, once you've done that type of rollout, the next thing you might want to do is you don't know who to identify. You want to do it at random. So there is this very popular idea of canary release. So with a canary release, I'm going to tell Split, I want you to give to 10% of the users this feature. And when I click Save Changes now, I think this is, I never get sick of this actually. It's still fun. When the app updates, there's just a random scatter now of blue users. So what happened? Split actually takes that key and it hashes it with a unique key for the feature flag. And then each user gets a bucket from that between 0 and 99. So it's not pictured on my screen, but every single one of these boxes has a bucket between 0 and 99. And what I know is that when I set this to 10%, only the buckets that were between 0 and 9 switched on, plus whatever buckets I had from my whitelist, right? If I go to 20%, for example, I don't shuffle and jumble. I don't need to know how much traffic is coming or how much traffic to expect. I just change the threshold at which I'm going to turn the key on based on its bucket, right? So when we went from 10 to 20%, we added 10%, but we didn't pick a new 10% underneath. So it's a true ramp. So this is powerful as you start to roll out features. And the other part to it, which is this is really a bit of foreshadowing, is that you can keep an eye on Split's measurements. And if Split sees any trouble with any of the, like the number of errors that are on your application page or your screen, or any other business metric that you want to manage with Split, Split is watching this and producing these numbers and can even alert on these numbers so that when you come to your Split, if things are not going well, there's a kill switch up here in the right corner. There's an API for doing this too, but I can hit the kill switch and now this is going to take this feature all the way back to all off, right? Just like that. And you know, the screen updates that you're seeing, this isn't like some fake program that I set up as a visual aid. Like the boxes on the left are a real JavaScript application that is responding to the updates from the Split cloud. So that's how fast it is to do a kill, just like you saw. Now, once you've fixed the feature and it looks like it's back in good shape, the restore button takes you back to exactly the rollout that you were in before. So this is going to take us to that pretty 20% rollout that we saw. So last note on rollouts, there is an additional category called targeting rules, which include a number of different bits of functionality. But the ones that I want to talk about today are scheduling. So your product manager can come in and say, let's go 5% at this date and let's go to 50% at that date. You can do that with the API too, but it's possible in the UI. And then this is maybe the richest but most complex, the targeting rules. Targeting rules, this goes back to the architecture where I said you can look at customer information without passing it to Split Cloud. Here we've said we want to reach 25 to 34-year-olds that live somewhere on the West Coast. We're going to pass them as treatment. So Split will look at that locally and then throw away that information. We don't have to go back to our cloud to figure this out. And this can be, you know, anything you want it to be. So I had location state. Maybe I wanted to add to be even more strict. I could say location city, something like LA, SFO, whatever I'm using for airport codes. These are totally flexible. So that's what this ruling is all about. There's also some dependencies that I'm not going to get into, but you can build dependencies between splits so that you can have hierarchies of splits and kill splits in a hierarchical structure. That's all kind of advanced Split for another time. Any questions about this? This is the end of the rollouts chapter in my demo.
Okay, great. Yeah. Larry, he says he loves this, so you've got another fan, but his previous question was, what's the best way to track feature flags? And he asked that sort of at the beginning, so I don't know if that's something you're going to get into more, or if he was asking about this. But I guess I'll just throw that question out there.
How to track them as in their life cycle?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good way to answer it. And Larry, if you have anything more specific about what you're looking for, just go ahead and update your question, and we'll ask that.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question, Larry. And the fact is that Split has a number of ways that it assists you in the life cycle of your splits, right? But maybe the most colorful and interesting one is the rollout board. So I'll start there.
Okay,
The
and yeah,
rollout
he
board.
did chime in. He was talking about life cycle, like you guessed.
Okay, good. So
Yeah.
the idea with the rollout board is that your feature flags, as you create them, have different statuses, right? So you can see there's a column here for the killed splits, right? If I scroll to the right, we'll eventually get to experimentation, splits that have been 100% released, and then retirement statuses too, right? Any
Hmm.
split in the system can have a different status with respect to this rollout board. If you've done agile Kanban style project management, then this will look familiar to you, right? It's very much in the spirit of a Kanban board. And so underneath these little coins that you see, they're actually specific to your environments. So when you set up Split, you choose your environments. I have dev, prod, QA, stage, and then I have an Android QA environment, an iOS QA environment, and then a toy environment. Who knows what that one's about, right? Each of these environments gets their status updated on this page. So you can see if it has traffic. This one received traffic a day ago, but it had no traffic in dev. All this is available from this page. So it's easy to switch rollout status. Like if I come to my daily animal here, I can look at the split and I can change its status. Maybe it's actually in a ramping state. And then when we come back to the rollout board, we'll find that in a different status column. So this is one part of the answer. And for retiring splits, I would say you move the splits when they're 100% released. You either leave them permanently in the code, that's the status, or you can mark them removed from code, and then at that point delete the split from the code. So that's a good way to manage. And then there's also the environments dashboard, which has been in Split for longer. This one auto finds by modification date and traffic splits in the system. So this is a good place to look at split state too. But even more important than the split state, remember I told you I've got all these environments that I've constructed for my split deployment, right? If I look at the audit log, every user that's had activity, any change they've made anywhere in Split is going to get updated here. Even that updating the status on the daily animal split shows up here, right? If I look at one of these updates, it's a visual diff of the changes that were made. So here I am on the new onboarding split, switching things from 10% to 90%. This audit trail comes with an approval flow, which if we have time, I'll show you. And the approval flow lets somebody like an administrator choose whether or not to show a change, to push a change through to the system. They can either approve it or reject it. So all these there's a lot of different topics, and I know I'm sort of talking off in several directions, but hopefully you can see how they tie together for this answer about, lifecycle management. There are different tools for different tasks, all related to this topic.
All right, great. Yeah, and I guess one last question sort of in this area. Edward's wondering, can we do geo-based feature enablement as the end user moves around?
Yeah. So I do that kind of thing in some of my demos. I have like a location-based feature flagging, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing that you have to do is you have to pass the location in some form that our matcher will be able to look at. So like this prestige credit cards application here. This is the split for this guy. You're going to look in this case at the radius from a particular location. So this is just a percentage release at this point, but I'm matching on London. there's no built-in geolocation matcher, so you have to do
Okay.
the math before you pass it to split. But once you've worked out the distance between one location and another, then or radius, then you can pick up on users that way.
All right, great.
Good question. Okay, so next chapter. You are all now product owners at a nonprofit. And the purpose of the nonprofit is to drive dog adoption. And you have a split that you've set up, but it's not an on off split, it's a multivariant split, red, green, blue. It could have been purple, yellow, orange. I mean, I have enough dog pictures to do that, but I thought to keep things simple, we'll have it as what ultimately will be an ABC experiment. And the thing that's happening is you've got a picture and you've got some text that you're hoping will get people to click on those two buttons. So if I switch from red to blue here, you can get a peek at what the treatment looks like. Split shows a different dog and a different slogan, right? So we want as many clicks as possible on donate and adopt, but we're not sure which of those campaigns is going to be the most effective. So before I even get into showing the experiment that's coming, let me show you something special that Split can do here. The product owner can actually come in and say, you know what, bring a pet home is just not endearing. What this should say is bring a cute dog home. And the picture that you see at the left it's a melancholy dog, too sad. Uh, I'm the product owner. I think that this picture is going to be more effective. It's a hypothesis, right? So I pop it in. And when I save the changes at the Split console here, which, as I mentioned earlier, could have gone through an approval flow, but I'm just going to pass them in. It's going to change the picture of the dog. It's going to change the text, right? So I've upgraded this. Now, why is this special, right? I mean, a moment ago, you saw me switch from red to blue and it changed. But now I'm doing, mutating blue. What's happening? There's no developer code changes required to do this. I didn't have anybody go update the application in order to update the text or the picture. What's happening is Split actually has a JSON payload, and you get to structure it any way you want. So I have another example of buttons that are all laid out, and all of the HTML styling and CSS, it's all specified in JSON so that the product owner can actually make whatever changes they want in potentially even in production, right? Using this facility. So there's a lot of power here. And it does come paired with a safety net. That's the approval flows that I was mentioning. But dynamic config, we call it, is one of the features that draw Split customers. So while you're chewing on that, and we can come back to this if we need to, but I do want to show you the ABC experiment, right? So here I've got my Split. I've got some data loaded up in it. It's the same red, green, blue. For this experiment, I gave the treatment out 3 ways. When you have lots and lots of treatments, you may end up not having enough samples. So you have to watch out as you go to 4 and 5 and 6 and such treatments. You need a large base of users in order to get statistically significant results. But we had plenty for this. I did 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And all you have to do to get into the experiment results is to click on the metrics impact tab. And so this is telling us that we got 6,000 users that saw the blue treatment and 6,000 users that saw the red treatment. That's great. Split even calculates the sample ratio. There's something called a sample ratio match that you have to pass. And it's good. So we're all set to actually look at the results. And then down below here, these 2 humble little tiles are telling a lot of the story. So what's happened is whenever somebody clicked on adopt or purchase, an event got sent to Split, right? And it could have come from an integration. This one came from Google Analytics, right? Or it could come from an SDK call inside of Split. But those events, as they came in, we counted them according to whether they were for a blue user or a red user. So we know the number of clicks for those 2 different treatments. And what this tile is telling us is that blue got almost 6% fewer clicks to adopt, almost 5% fewer clicks to donate than red did. So blue lost to red, strictly speaking. And another product might just pat you on the back and tell you blue is great. But split keeps the tile yellow, and it has this whole statistically inconclusive business, right? And what it's telling us is that it actually did something called the t-test, and it produced a p-value that was 14%. And by default, split will not declare a winner until the p-value is below 5%. So this is not a situation where split is telling you that blue is better than red. If we switch from comparing blue to red and instead compare blue to green, it's a different story. The tiles turn green and split says there's significant desired impact. Well, in this case, blue got almost 50% more clicks for each. So it was a big winner. And now I will perform the trick of clicking on the tile to take us deeper into the data science for adoptions in this case. So we've got our impact over time, and this is my personal favorite. You can make a nice multicolored chart out of all of the ABC experiment. And this is showing us that red consistently got more clicks than blue or green over the short time that we ran this experiment. Now, blue and red converged, so probably you want to run this for longer. We actually encourage our customers to run experiments for 2 weeks. You can peak before that for sure, but at 2 weeks you'll iron out a lot of the seasonality that might occur, and it's going to be a safer place to reach that statistical significance. So split is, I think one way to put it is it's training wheels to get you into the business of a mathematically sound assessment of the performance of your features, right? And this little example of the dogs and trying to get people to adopt dogs just as an entry point for you to understand what's necessary to get to where you want to go. Now, if you use split for a longer period of time, I have a financial customer here. The tiles that I'm talking about, they build up. So you end up not with 2 tiles, but with a whole bank of tiles. And that's where you get into the biggest benefits, right, of doing this impact-driven analysis of your features. So here this customer deployed a feature, and it's a mixed bag. There were tiles that were green, and so things headed in the right direction. There were a couple of tiles that are red. You know, how drastic a problem that is requires some interpretation. That's part of the reason we don't automate kills to date. We want you to look at the results. We automate showing you the degradation, but not actually pulling the trigger on turning something off. But some customers use this type of a view. What they do, they call do no harm experiments. And the goal of a do no harm experiment is to release a feature with all the tiles being yellow. You don't want to perturb the system at all. You don't want to see errors climb, errors decrease. You just want to see that everything is the same, especially for what sometimes are called guardrail metrics. So if you're using split, if you're a split user, but not everybody in your shop is, you can pass them the data. They can put it into BigQuery or my favorite is the PDF, because this is something that is easy to pass around on email, right? To give a report card for your features. So another way to think of it is like a production unit test. You're going to keep an eye on all this, make sure that it looks good. Scott.
Yes.
How are we doing?
Good. That's very cool. I'm really impressed with the way the statistics are built into it, so people don't go running off to wrong conclusions from small data sets. You know, and as far as this one that we're looking at here, you know, when you set it up, it was about, you know, which campaign was more effective. But are we actually looking at something different here, like in terms of what's happening in an application, or is this the same?
Yeah, when I was working with the dog adoption, the tiles were about how often are people clicking to donate and to adopt.
Right.
In the case of the financials here, like we can look at one of the financial definitions. So I can view the metric definition. Metrics are super simple. What we're saying is this application crash rate, that's the event that we're getting from Sentry or from wherever. We want to count it. These are the formulas that you can put on the events. So if you've got a purchase where there's a value, you could sum it or you could average it. If you're looking to do conversions or funnels, the ratio and the percentage metrics are useful. And not only that, but you can actually filter by properties. So if your event has information about it, like for example, the location, you can filter by location and say, I want events from the EU, I want events from Japan, I want events from the US. You can filter them right here.
Gotcha.
The alert policy is where you can put the threshold on it. So if I do nothing here and I create this, what this says is that if the number of errors ever increases by any amount, send me the notification about it. Let me know.
Got it. Very nice. Yeah, so there's no questions about this part of the demo right now. So if you want to go on to another segment, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think one thing that might be fun, because I mentioned it earlier and I wasn't sure we'd have time for it, but I want to highlight the experience with dynamic config a little bit more. I have a split called buttons, and buttons is a little different from the earlier examples because it's a richer piece of JSON, right? So when you, as a product owner, are working with the developer, if it's anything like my job was, they would say, I need you to spec it. I want you to write the spec. And then they would read the spec and they would say, write the spec again, more detail. And so there was this whole process of me putting into words what I wanted in software. And it's just a very slow and inefficient way to communicate, right? If you come to a developer and you tell them, I want a button to be called save, and I want a button to be called restore. So I'll pop this up before the changes have been made, right? I think I go here. Yep, here's the buttons. So there's Adam and David. So I'm going to save the changes here, and we're going to see what happens to the names in our buttons. So the point is that you make canonical the changes to these buttons in the JSON at the split user interface. And what that does is give you the ability to specify any aspect of your feature in the cloud, right? In the cloud-based feature delivery platform. So one nice thing for developers is that if it's not part of the JSON definition in the feature flag, then it's up to them how, it becomes very clear that they either don't know and won't proceed until it's defined, or will proceed with their own decisions, right? It wasn't covered. You didn't tell me that was something you wanted control over. Everything you said you wanted control over explicitly was part of this definition, right? So I don't know how eloquent I am in explaining this, but again, because of my background as a product owner, this type of a feature is very appealing because it allows the product owner, and the developers I'm working with to come to agreement about how to build a feature using a strict, schema definition inside the feature flagging tool, right? So it's just an idea that I wanted to put into folks' head.
Super. Hey, we do have another question. This one from Jay. He's wondering, how elaborate can you get with this tool? Can you add if-then statements for people who you're rolling out new functionality to?
Yeah. So let's look at some code. I think let me pull up the dog. It's one of my favorite demos here. Okay. So the dog actually has two splits that it uses. It uses the multivariant demo, which is the one that I was clicking around with and setting the dynamic config on. So get treatment with config passes back the JSON too. That's why it's with config. The regular feature flag evaluation is just get treatment. And so this second feature flag actually controls the text on one of the buttons, right? And if we look at how they're implemented, the draw button here takes the treatment that it got from split, and it's either on or off, or if split wasn't there, it's good habit to implement what's called the control block. This is the failover, right? If you can't get a rollout plan. So this decides, with that if then else statement, what to put on the button. The interesting thing about the get treatment with config is that if you look at how it's handled, so we call draw screen, and we pass in the result, and the config here that's the JSON, so it's being parsed, right? This has no if then else statement. It uses the fields off the JSON to define, this is the call to action, right? On the dog page. This is the image URL and the image width that are being sent from that. So I had in my case 3 different variants, right? But if I added a 4th or a 5th or a 6th variant, as long as they all have the same schema to their JSON, there's no code changes necessary. You're going to pick up those additional variants without adding a new element to the if statement. So I don't know if I answered your question. I might have riffed without intending to, but that's one thing that I think is worth showing. You can do feature flags without if then else statements.
Okay, great. Was there anything else that you wanted to show about the tool?
No, I think this was great. I mean, the last, I guess I have one last doorknob type thing that I can leave the audience with.
Okay.
We have Google Analytics integration. I mentioned that, but one integration that is popular, and if you have an APM tool, it doesn't matter the vendor. We probably integrate with it. We have integrations with most of them. But the one that I have up here is Datadog. Is popular. And with Split, you can do a very simple integration to Datadog such that when somebody in Split changes a feature flag, Datadog gets a message and annotates it on its chart. So you can look at activity on things like your page latency, or this is just CPU utilization, right? And if you see some kind of correlated change to a change in a feature flag, this gives you a good visual on that right away. Because with all these tools, whether it's Full Story or New Relic or Datadog, the problem they have is that they're looking at data and not realizing that there's an A group and a B group to that data. Feature flags divide the world, right? So if you're using the tool by itself, it's not going to have visibility into the change that the feature flag made. But we have integrations with most of these vendors to pass that information to them so they can display it in a form like this one where you'll have context. So.
Okay. Super. And I have to note, your one demo involved adopting a dog. The one integration you discuss is Datadog. I'm just noticing a trend here. I'll just say. Seem to be a dog fan.
Yeah, I love my cat very much. Let me see if I can find you again. There we are. I love my cat very much, but I found that the cat pictures I had in the demo were very standoffish. He has this real Clint Eastwood kind of look to him, where he's just not as cute. So I had to get rid of the cat pictures.
As far as other questions, somebody's wondering here, how do I implement a feature flag?
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a great question. So you saw towards the end of my presentation today, I showed you examples of feature flags that are traditional with the if then else statement, where you take Split's response, it's on, it's off, and you pass whatever, you do whatever you want to do. under feature accordingly, right? And then you also saw my dynamic config sample where you don't need the if then else statement. You take the JSON payload and you implement the UI or the algorithm or whatever it is that you're doing. That's what it is at its most basic, right? You know, sometimes for other styles of demo, I go through a live presentation where I actually code up a feature flag and we use the split UI to make a new feature flag. And there's a syntax generator to pull some of the boilerplate code across. And if anybody in the audience would like to see that, just let us know after the presentation. I can certainly put together another demonstration for you.
Okay. We do have a question here from Ned about the licensing. I wonder if you can kind of go through that again. I think you mentioned up top about I think it was a 1 to 10, something for free. You know, is there a sweet spot? Like, what's the metric for how the licensing works?
Yeah, I think the bottom line is that if you're a shop with fewer than 10 developers and product managers, seats, right? If you know
Okay.
that you have like 4 seats, then it's probably the case that the free edition is right for you, because we don't put limits on the number of splits. We don't put limits on the traffic, right? So it's now the place where even small shops sometimes end up buying the full edition is if they want to do experimentation. Experimentation is not part of the free edition. Only feature flags. So if you liked what you heard today about impact driven analysis and you want to start doing the types of things that I did with the dogs, and charting your effectiveness, right? Then you can't do that with the free edition, unfortunately.
Okay, so that's an experimentation thing.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder. We do have a poll question here, and maybe it would be helpful before that poll question, just if you could kind of define feature experimentation for us, just like one more time, just to clarify what that is, because that's what our poll
Yeah,
question is about.
sure. I think at its most basic, it's about deciding that instead of going on your gut or taking sometimes they talk about the highest paid person's opinion, the hippo, right? That's kind of
Right.
an industry thing to talk about the hippo,
Yeah.
right? If you don't want to take the hippo's opinion, if you don't want to go on your gut, then what you want to do is science. You want to have a hypothesis, you want to have a control and a treatment, and you want to test on some set of customers what is actually the case. And that hypothesis could be that if I show them the picture of the dog by the door, they'll click on adopt more often, right? That was kind of the example that I provided. But it could be
Right.
something like if I move my login from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen, people will log in more often, right? That's another hypothesis. Um, you can shoot the moon, because if you have a hypothesis that's wild and you roll it out to 5% and your early feedback is that nobody likes it, you can just
Uh-huh.
take it down without having much of an impact. I mean, the beauty of having a nice, flexible experimentation framework is that it lets you test hypotheses effectively, right? With the minimum
Yeah.
amount of time, but with the maximum amount of power associated with understanding the truth. So.
Great. That's a great definition. So let's pop up the poll question here. What's your reaction to feature experimentation? Did you learn about it for the first time, or is it something that you're planning on implementing? Do you have feature flags, but you haven't used them for experimentation? Experimentation is part of our practice, but it's time consuming and manual to set up. And then the last one there is experimentation is automated, statistically significant response to every feature we release, which is kind of like the full bore version that David was just describing. And then, of course, other. So we've just got a few responses rolling in. We'll give everybody a second to sort of digest those, and David, while we're waiting on people to enter their responses on that, I guess one other question that's come in here. Well, actually, a couple. So we got one from Bradford. He's asking, do I understand that the API permits me to ingest event data from an existing source?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So you can, at the SDK, send us event data, which typically isn't from a third party source, or you can use our REST API. We have a bulk events endpoint. And if you want to just, the neat thing is actually you can backload event data from a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and our experimentation engine will recalculate and pull that data into your results. So you don't have to report it in real time or anything like that. You can do it on a batch driven ETL type schedule that suits you. We do it with S3 as well, just in case you're an AWS shop. You can drop the
Mhm.
events into S3, and we'll take them that way. That's probably the highest volume way to do it.
Okay, great. Another question here from Larry. If we no longer use split, and he says that probably wouldn't happen, but how easy is it to remove the feature flags?
Yeah, I mean, you've got an if then else statement, right? So the hard part is, do you want the true or do you want the false? So
Mhm.
that's for the traditional feature flag, right? With the dynamic config, you can take the JSON you want and embed it. That's a cheap, fast way to do it, right? Or take the appropriate action, with that JSON. With retiring feature flags, what we hear from all of our customers is that the work of actually deleting a flag is rarely complex. The hard part is
Mhm.
knowing which flags are ripe to be deleted. And that's where that rollout board and environments dashboard came in for identifying things. And we have integrations with things like Jira and Azure DevOps that also help you manage the flags over their life cycle. So it's probably somebody in split marketing will slap my wrist for not talking more about Jira and Azure DevOps, but at least I mentioned them at the end.
All right. Well, I think we're the responses have solidified here. So let's go straight to the percentages. And it looks like you were telling a lot of people about experimentation for the first time today. 60% learned about it for the first time. So,
That's
but we
great.
we did have
Welcome, and I hope. Yeah, I hope I talked at the right level. I mean, sometimes it's hard because you have true beginners that you want to reach, but you also have old timers that want to hear something new. So
right.
it can be difficult to choose, but hopefully I did a good job today. So
Well, I think so. And you got a lot. We got a lot of people who have used feature flags. 10% there, and then people who are doing experimentation as well. So great mix there. I guess one last question. And we had a question from Ned. How can someone learn more about split experimentations? But I guess I'll broaden that to, in addition to sort of best practices about it, where can they learn more about, getting started with you guys?
that's a fantastic question. Um, Barring anything else, I mean, I'll throw out that my email address is david.martin@split.io. So if you just have an additional question you want to ask me, I'll get back to you. If you're interested in a proper presentation of Split from a salesperson, we can arrange that. I'll figure out how to set that up for you. We'll find the right resources for you according to your desires.
Okay, super. Yeah, and just a reminder that in the handout section, there's also a link there to book a personalized demo with Split as well, in addition to david.martin at split.io. Um, so David, it looks like we're out of time, but really appreciate the demo and the way you've been able to answer people's questions and flow that in. This has been fantastic. So thanks for the intro to Split.
Sure. Thank you, Scott. And looking at the polls, I would say to those that are new to this, welcome. You're going to have a great time. Keep coming back. And to those of you that have matured, especially that group that already has automated statistically significant responses. Like, good for you. Keep going and let's help everybody else get there too. So
Great. Okay, and before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business. That's the $300 Amazon gift card prize drawing. And as David and I discussed earlier, we are not the winners, but we're wishing you all the best. May the odds ever be in your favor. And the winner of the $300 Amazon gift card is Paul Stopko from Massachusetts. So congratulations, Paul. We'll be in touch about getting your card. And with that, on behalf of Actual Tech Media and our team here, I want to thank you all for attending and for all your great questions. And again, I'd like to thank to Split and David for making this event possible and for the great demo. That concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day.